There's an old, abandoned house on the edge of town, a place most locals avoid. The windows are shattered, and the front yard is overgrown with weeds that sway ominously in the wind. Its reputation is grim, with whispers of strange occurrences and disappearances dating back decades. But the real story, the one that no one dares to talk about, started with a young girl named Evelyn. Evelyn had always been curious, drawn to the mysterious house like a moth to a flame. One cold, autumn evening, she convinced her friends to go with her to explore it. Armed with flashlights, they entered the house, their breath visible in the chilly air. Dust covered every surface, and the air was thick with the scent of decay. As they wandered through the dark halls, Evelyn stumbled upon a locked door in the basement. It was old, with strange markings carved into the wood. Something about it chilled her to the bone, but she couldn't resist. She found an old iron key hanging nearby and, with a trembling hand, unlocked the door. What she found on the other side was unimaginable. A small room, dimly lit by a single candle, held a large mirror with an ornate gold frame. It was cracked, but the reflection seemed wrong, distorted, almost alive. Evelyn's friends begged her to leave, but she was transfixed. As she stepped closer, the reflection began to shift, forming a shadowy figure that didn't match their movements. Suddenly, the mirror's surface rippled like water, and a cold, skeletal hand reached out, grabbing Evelyn's wrist with an iron grip. Her friends screamed as the hand pulled her into the mirror, her terrified eyes the last thing they saw before she disappeared. Panic-stricken, they fled the house and told the police, but no one believed them. Evelyn was never seen again, and the house was declared off-limits. Yet strange things started happening to those who had been with her that night. One by one, they began to vanish each time, their mirrors at home shattered without explanation. Legend has it, if you stand in front of a mirror in that house and say Evelyn's name 3 times, you'll see her face appear, frozen in terror, begging for help. But beware, because once you see her, it's already too late. The mirror will come for you next. And when it does, there's no escape. The authorities eventually stopped searching for Evelyn. Her parents moved away, crushed by the loss of their daughter and the rumors that surrounded her disappearance. The house was sealed off, but that didn't stop people from daring each other to get close. Most chickened out before they even reached the porch, but a few braver, foolish souls made it inside. One of them was Derek, a university student who didn't believe in ghosts or curses. He loved debunking urban legends, so when his friends told him about the house and the mirror, he scoffed at their warnings. To him, it was just an old story blown out of proportion by time and fear. One night, armed with a camera, he decided to prove once and for all that the mirror legend was a hoax. He slipped through the rusted gate and entered the house, the creaking of the floorboards echoing in the stillness. The house seemed to breathe around him, but Derek stayed focused. His flashlight revealed the decaying interior, and soon enough, he found the door to the basement. There was a locked room, just as the stories described. The same eerie symbol scratched into the wood, the same key hanging nearby. Derek smirked, unlocking it without hesitation. The room was as unsettling as had imagined, the mirror standing at the center, tall and cracked. He set up his camera and faced the mirror, heart pounding in his chest. Even though he didn't believe, the atmosphere weighed heavily on him. But Derek was determined. "Evelyn," he said, his voice steady, though his reflection wavered in the dim light. "Evelyn, Evelyn." At first, nothing happened. The mirror remained still, reflecting his image back at him. Derek exhaled, feeling a strange mixture of relief and disappointment. Suddenly, the room grew colder. His breath misted in the air, and the mirror's surface began to ripple, just like in the stories. His reflection twisted, becoming dark, its features barely recognizable. Derek took a step back, heart pounding as the outline of a face began to form behind his own girl's face, pale, her eyes wide with fear. "Evelyn." Before Derek could react, the room plunged into darkness. His flashlight flickered and went out, leaving him in total blackness. He fumbled for his camera, but the only thing he could hear was his own ragged breathing and a faint whisper. "Help me." The voice was faint, but unmistakable. It wasn't coming from the mirror, it was all around him. Derek's skin crawled as the air grew thick with a foul smell, like something rotting. He tried to run, but it was as if the room itself had shifted, trapping him in place. Then, the whispers grew louder. "I'm here, trapped forever." Suddenly, a pair of cold hands grabbed his shoulders from behind. Derek screamed, jerking away, but when he turned, there was no one there. His heart raced as the mirror's surface rippled again, this time more violently. In its reflection, he saw a figure standing in the room behind him, tall and shadowy, its face obscured. The figure stretched out a hand toward him, just like the stories had said. The camera fell from his hands as Derek felt something cold and sharp grip his arm. He yanked away, bolting out of the room and scrambling up the stairs. The whispers followed him, rising in volume, pleading and sinister at the same time. He barely made it out of the house, breathless and shaking. When he turned back, the house loomed silently in the dark, as if nothing had happened. His camera lay abandoned inside, but he didn't care. He never wanted to step foot in that place again. For weeks after, Derek tried to convince himself it had been his imagination. But every time he looked into a mirror, he saw a faintest outline of a girl's face behind his own, growing clearer with each passing day. No matter where he was, she was there. The legend was true, and Derek realized, with growing dread, that Evelyn wasn't the only one trapped in the mirror's grasp. The curse had chosen him next. At first, Derek tried to ignore it, thinking that maybe he was just traumatized by the experience in the house. But the strange occurrences started creeping into his everyday life. It wasn't just the fleeting image of Evelyn behind him in mirrors, it was more. His reflection began to act differently. It started small, his reflection's lips moving when he wasn't speaking, or blinking when his eyes remained wide open. Derek would stand frozen in front of the mirror, watching as his double twisted and shifted in ways that defied logic. At times, his reflection would tilt its head and grin at him, a grin Derek couldn't match, no matter how hard he tried. Then, the dreams began. Every night, he found himself back in the old house, wandering through endless hallways. No matter which direction he turned, he ended up in front of the mirror. And every night, Evelyn would be waiting, her hollow eyes staring out from the other side. Her whispers filled his mind, begging for release. "Help me, save meth." Worst part was waking up. Derek would bolt upright in bed, drenched in sweat, only to find the same whispering voice echoing faintly around his room, even though he was awake. One night, while standing in front of his bathroom mirror, exhausted and desperate, Derek decided to smash it. He picked up a heavy object and swung at the glass, shattering it into 1,000 pieces. But even as the shards fell, he could still see his reflection, whole and undisturbed, smiling back at him through the broken fragments. Panicking, he backed away, his reflection remaining fixed in place, watching him. The whispers grew louder now, filling his ears. His phone buzzed, breaking the silence for a brief moment. It was a message from one of his friends, a last of the group that had gone into the house with Evelyn. The text simply read, "Help. I see her." Derek's heart sank. He knew what that meant. Evelyn's curse was spreading. His friend was next. Desperate, Derek decided to go back to the house. He didn't know what else to do. If he couldn't escape the curse, maybe there was a way to stop it at the source. Armed with nothing but a flashlight and a hammer, he returned to the house on the edge of town, the place where everything had started. As he approached the house, he noticed the front door was already ajar, creaking in the wind. His friend must have beaten him there. He stepped inside cautiously, the air thick with the scent of rot and mildew. He called out, but the only response was the distant, hollow echo of his own voice. The basement door was wide open. Derek's hand shook as he descended the stairs, each step feeling heavier than the last. At the bottom, the familiar sight of the mirror greeted him, though this time, it wasn't cracked. It was whole, pristine even, and standing in front of it, frozen in place, was his friend. "Don't," Derek whispered, but it was too late. His friend was already staring into the glass, transfixed. His reflection, like Derek's before him, began to warp and twist, until it no longer resembled the person it mirrored. Instead, it became something dark, something hungry. Suddenly, the room felt like it was closing in. The temperature dropped rapidly, and the whispers returned, louder now, more insistent. The mirror's surface rippled violently, and Derek's friend let out a blood-curdling scream as something Samina reached out from the other side. Evelyn, with a strength fueled by fear and adrenaline. Derek lunged forward, smashing the mirror with the hammer. The glass shattered into countless pieces, and the figure on the other side let out a horrific shriek as the connection between the worlds was severed. Silence fell over the room, but it wasn't the silence of peace. It was the silence of something waiting. Derek looked down at his friend, who lay unconscious but alive. He had done it. He had stopped Evelyn, at least for now. But as he turned to leave, he caught a glimpse of something in one of the broken shards of glass. His reflection was still there, standing watching him, smiling. The curse wasn't over. It had only just begun.